Welcome back to Legitimate Targets, everybody. We're going to get this episode out right after we record it because of the breaking news in Iran today. Joining me is Professor Syed Mohammed Morandi. He is an expert Iranian American geopolitical analyst. He's a professor of English literature and Orientalism at the University of Tehran, and I'm very honored to be joined by him today, given his busy schedule. So, Professor, thank you so much for being here. What are your initial thoughts to this large-scale, unprovoked attack by Israel that took place over last night?
Thank you very much for inviting me. Contrary to what many think, the Iranians were expecting an attack, and air defenses, it seems, did work pretty well. I think some senior Iranian officials didn't think that the Israeli regime would cross the ultimate red line by assassinating and murdering senior government officials and military officials in these strikes, and that led to losses. But it seems that the Israeli regime wants escalation. Obviously, this is something that Netanyahu needs more than anyone else. It is not in the interest of the regime itself. It is already overextended. It is carrying out Holocaust in Gaza. It is its economy is in ruins. It's despised across the world, as I've noticed in my travels abroad to different countries, China, Russia, regional countries, Latin American countries, the places that I've been to over the last year and a half or so. We've seen, based upon what colleagues in these different countries say, how people have turned against the regime and how they despise the regime now. I think it's clear that the Iranians will be striking back very swiftly. Probably, I would guess, within the next few hours. It could be a bit more than that, but there will be a very heavy strike, and I would guess that this will last more than a day or two, and the Iranians are preparing for wave after wave of attack, missile and drone attacks. The only question that I think is it has to be that the only remaining question, or the big question, is whether the United States wants to enter the conflict. If that happens, then it's quite clear that those regimes in the Persian Gulf that host American bases will be complicit. And the demand of Iranians would be to deal with those regimes. And that would mean the end of these oil and gas-rich family dictatorships, and the global market will explode. The price of oil, the price of gas, and I think that will very swiftly bring down the global economy into a situation far worse than the Great Depression of the early 20th century. Just a couple of other things that come to mind, and that is that a significant number of civilians were murdered. Civilian targets were attacked. And it's very interesting that the French are supporting the attack. They seem to be, in the language that they're using, seems to indicate that they support the attack on Iran. And the head of the IAEA, he is also refusing to condemn this attack on Iranian civilians, civilian infrastructure, and the nuclear program. So that basically shows how international institutions based in the West, how compromised they are, how discredited they are, how useless they are. And it shows the degree to which Western governments lack any sense of morality. Of course, after Gaza, I think that's of no surprise to anyone.
And I want to reiterate my condolences, because it wasn't just military leaders and scientists that were targeted. As you said, there's horrifying images of children and other innocent civilians who were murdered in this attack. Right before you joined me here, there was a new article in the Jerusalem Post which indicated from Israeli sources that the United States had no intention of ever making good on a new JCPOA, a new Iran deal, and that this was all a ruse. And Israel was actually worried by Trump's statements last night that he had given up that ruse by signifying that a Israeli attack was possible very soon. Do you think that the information that the U.S. was in on the game, is enough to justify a response against U.S. assets in the region?
I don't know how the Iranians will respond to the United States at this stage. What is clear is that there will be a direct response to the Israeli regime. But the Iranians have many options. If the United States gets directly involved, then there's no doubt that the Iranians will strike American bases, and not just American bases, but American assets across the region. They'll drive the Americans out of the region. The Iranians have made that decision. But how far they see the role of the United States, or how much they see the role of the United States, and what sort of response the U.S. should have as a result right now, that I don't know. That's something that I'm sure they're deciding on. But in general, if I was living in Qatar or the Emirates or Bahrain, or one of these other family dictatorships, I would think about leaving very swiftly. Because if the United States joins the fight, the Persian Gulf is not very wide, and the Iranians control one side of it. And Iran, the underground bases that are designed to strike out at the Israeli regime are one thing. The bases in the Persian Gulf, or that are focused on the Persian Gulf, are another thing altogether. And it's very easy for them to destroy everything on the other side of the Persian Gulf. It will be very if Iran feels that any of those regimes, or collectively those regimes, are complicit in any aggression against Iran, I think it's very clear that they will be swept away very quickly. So I don't know what will happen. Hopefully, Trump will be more sane than usual. But if he does happen to be insane enough to enter the fray, then I think those regimes are finished.
How do you view the complicity of Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states thus far in defending the Zionist entity from drone attacks, also patrolling the Yemeni border for any missiles being launched from there? And how do you think this will play moving forward with further attacks? Do you think that these Gulf states, these Arab leaders and countries, will be able to continue their defense of the Zionist entity if an all-out attack takes place by Iran?
Well, all of these regional countries that have U.S. bases are helping, effectively, the United States defend the Israeli regime, and helping the United States assist the Israeli regime carry out attacks. The bases in Turkey, the bases in the Emirates, the bases in Qatar, and in Bahrain in particular, these are very important. And of course, Jordan allows Americans, British, the Israelis to use their airspace to down Iranian missiles and drones. So the complicity is almost universal. These, even though some like Qatar pretend that they support the Palestinian cause, but in reality they are proxies of the United States. They are client regimes. And Turkey, unfortunately, under Erdogan, it is no different. Erdogan not only do the U.S. bases in Turkey function as a protective shield for the Israeli regime? But also, we know that he transports oil to Netanyahu. He does trade. He compensates for the lost trade from the Red Sea, and he has diplomatic relations. So all of the countries are complicit in one way or another. Some are weak, like the Iraqi government. They are still sanctioned, and their finances are controlled by the United States. But still, the complicity is more or less universal, except for Yemen, of course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Is there any word on the state of the nuclear sites that were hit? Is there any updates about radiation readings and levels or damage that may have been done to these deep underground centrifuges, for example?
As far as I know, there's been no damage to the key installations underground, and the Israelis don't have that capability. Some of the structures on the ground have been damaged or destroyed, but they are not of great significance. But as we speak, the government is checking to see if there are any radiation leaks or any problems. Apparently, no one has been killed. Again, as I said early on, contrary to the myths that are being spread by the Western media on behalf of the Israeli regime or to support the Israeli regime, a lot of the missiles were downed, and from my understanding, the majority of the missiles were down. And the warheads are not exceptionally large because they are fired from fighter jets, and they're launched from 100 kilometers away from the Iranian border. So they consume a lot of fuel, and therefore the warheads are not that big. I heard something like 140, 150 kilos per warhead. So the damage that's created is not enormous. And some of the radar installations and others that they hit, most of them are easily replaceable. It's not as if they've struck anything very sensitive or key that cannot be replaced or that's very expensive. So the real damage is the fact that they targeted civilians and they targeted government officials and their families, their children, their spouse. We've had families wiped out simply because they're neighbors of someone, or simply because they missed, or simply because they were related to someone. But of course, in the West, that really doesn't matter. We've seen that in Gaza. We saw that in the genocidal strikes in Lebanon. I was in Lebanon when they were bombing Beirut, and I recall how Western journalists in Beirut who had local fixers and local drivers and local producers. I recall them constantly saying they're bombing Hezbollah strongholds or Hezbollah targets, whereas they knew very well, just as well as I, that these were just ordinary apartment buildings housing families, and they were destroying the lives of these families. But that's how Western journalism works. Mainstream journalism.
What did you make of there was one flight that took off from the Zionist entity amidst this attack several hours ago, the Wings of Zion plane that belongs to the Prime Minister of Israel took off, presumably with him or other leaders of the Zionist entity in it, and it's circling off the coast of Israel. What did you make of that decision where commits a hit-and-run horrific attack on high-level leadership, nuclear sites, civilians in Iran in this major escalation, and then he flees his own country, presumably?
Well, we know how corrupt he is and how financially corrupt he and his wife are, and how his son in Florida is enjoying himself as others are carrying out the genocide. And his other son is also apparently doing quite well and very far away from any potential harm. So this cowardly behavior is something that's expected of such a regime. Uh, but I think it really doesn't matter. The fact, what really does matter is that what Netanyahu is doing through escalation after escalation is preserving power for himself. He's destroying the regime. You know as well as I, and your audience, I'm sure, knows that the Israeli, the way in which people across the world view the Israeli regime today is infinitely different from what it was 2 years ago. And even in the United States, the most propagandized country in the world, the mood has shifted. And every day that goes by, this is only going to get worse. Uh, the the Western media that I've seen over the last few hours is trying to portray the Israeli attack as sophisticated and heroic, and this is a genocidal regime. But it's not going to work. The Western media is not going to be able to fool people. People have seen too much. And so this is just going to make people across the world more angry that this regime is slaughtering people across border in different countries. And also, it is putting the global economy at risk. Netanyahu doesn't care about anyone but himself, and the people around him are the same. So if the global economy goes down and the lives of everyone is deeply affected and the lives of many destroyed, people will blame the regime. People already see that it is the Israeli regime that is threatening the livelihood of people across the globe. So this is not good news for the regime. It's not good news for the United States. It's not good news for the West, because the collective West, which has already demolished its soft power and destroyed its credibility, is only adding another piece of evidence that shows how inhumane and how brutal they are. But also, when the Iranian response comes, and the Iranian response can be wave after wave after wave. Iran has been preparing itself for over 20 years. When the response comes, you will see that people across the globe will be welcoming the Iranian response.
Do you think this is a make or break moment for both the Islamic Republic of Iran and the Zionist entity, and that if the Zionist entity is not forever changed at the end of this operation, or if it escalates into a full-scale war, that it could be a defining moment for Iran's future?
I think that when we look at Western think tanks and the so-called Iran experts and Western media, we see major miscalculations. They analyze Iran based upon based upon wishful thinking, or based upon the needs of those people who fund them. So they are of the belief that all you have to do is just push Iran a bit and the so-called regime will collapse. And that just shows that there's a fundamental misunderstanding. Iran will respond. It will respond harshly. People support a very harsh response. You can see it on the streets already. People are gathering in different cities, including in Tehran, demanding a response. I think that they just don't understand Iran. They want to see Iran in a certain way, so they interpret it in that way, and they create narratives based on their wishful thinking. So I think that actually what this has done is that it has united Iranians further. It has shown Iran that the Israeli regime is an aggressor, even against Iran. They initiated the conflict, that it targets civilians, and that Western media will not acknowledge that civilians are being targeted, and that the head of the IAEA is unwilling to condemn the regime. People are seeing that. So this is only going to unite Iranians further. It's going to make the Islamic Republic of Iran uh, stronger, and it will give them the backing the backing to provide the Israeli regime with a heavy slap in the face. On the other hand, I don't see this as ending well for the regime. Uh, Across the world, people are horrified at what the regime has done, uh, despite Western media and Western governments. But when Iran responds, we will see whether people across the world and especially across the region will be celebrating or not.
On a more positive note, Iran recently announced that they have become the first Islamic nation to achieve the capability of a full nuclear fuel cycle. Do you think that Israel viewed this moment as again a make or break moment for them, given this historic news that Iran has the capability to have all of the processes, all of the functions and systems and resources in place for civilian nuclear fuel capability, from mining the necessary goods to actually storing it, the full life cycle, to try and disrupt this? And do you think they will be able to disrupt this nuclear path that Iran is on, even if it's just for energy purposes, over the next 2 weeks, as they say, these attacks are going to be taking place?
No, I don't think that they will be able to prevent Iran from uh, having a nuclear fuel cycle. But I actually think that even though Iran is technologically speaking the most advanced country in this region and among Islamic countries as well, Iran has a very sophisticated high-tech industry despite all the sanctions. And in nanotechnology, stem cell research, the military, and it's quite self-sufficient in many regards. However, I don't think that this is the main reason for antagonism at all, either by the regime or by the West. These are all excuses. The only reason, the real reason why the West and the Israeli regime despise Iran is because of Iran's support for the Palestinian cause. Iran and Yemen, of course, are the only two countries that are sincere in their support for Palestine. The rest don't do anything, and many are actually, they pretend to be supportive, but in reality, they're the opposite. They're complicit. And we can name names and we can discuss these countries, but I think I've mentioned a couple already. So the real issue that the United States has and the Israeli regime have is that Iran is unwilling to relinquish the Palestinian people and their rights as a nation to return to their homes. That is the reason for their antagonism. That's why France, the regime in Paris, despises Iran. That's why the regime in London despises Iran. That's why the regime in Berlin despises Iran. Iran says no to an ethno-supremacist regime, and they say yes to an ethno-supremacist regime. And that is what makes Iran so awful and evil in their eyes.
Yes, I agree with you. I think this attack is the largest, indicator that we could have of the complicity of the Arab collaborators in what is going on in Gaza right now. I've got one more question for you. I know you're a busy man, so thank you for your time. There's been no official statement by the Kremlin yet. Peskov came out and said that he doesn't like the escalation, but he said that there's going to be an official statement coming soon. Do you believe that the Russian-Iranian Treaty on Comprehensive Strategic Partnership, which includes security measures, will have any impact moving forward for Iran's defense capabilities if this continues to escalate over the coming days?
Iran and Russia do cooperate a lot in the military realm. Iran exports to Russia, Russia exports to Iran, Iran assists Russia, Russia assists Iran. I think over the past 3 years that's become quite evident, and many claims have been made in the West, in fact. I'm sure that the Iranian-Russian relationship will continue to be very strong, and the same is true with the Iran-China relationship. But to be very frank, Iran doesn't depend on any foreign country. Iran is a fiercely independent country. It's not like any of the other countries in this region. It's very the revolution was very much about dignity, honor, independence, decisions being made in Tehran, and it's very much, I think, influenced by uh, the culture, the religious culture, the story of Karbala, the grandson of the Prophet, the son-in-law of the Prophet, and the themes of social justice and standing up against oppression and despots and so on. These come from that religious tradition, and so I think the Iranians feel that they will be able to manage the Israeli regime and the United States in case of aggression, but they will continue to have excellent relations with Russia. The relationship with Russia is very good. With China, it's very good, and with many countries across the global South, the relationship is excellent. So with BRICS nations, Iran has excellent relations, and I think as we move forward, the the West is going to become increasingly weak and isolated, and Iran's hand will grow stronger.
Well, Professor Morandi, thank you so much for joining me today. I just got to say that the majority of Americans now, as you know, do not stand with Israel, and that's incredible and historic. And many, many more each and every day are standing with you, and I stand with Iran and your people, and I look forward to celebrating the Iranian responses and victory very soon. So please stay safe, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We're uh, standing our ground, and I hope that in future we'll see better days for everyone. And thank you very much for your moral support.
Thank you.